Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, dear viewers, Assalamu alaikum. I am your host Faisal Raza Khan and you are watching Foresight. Viewers, Middle Eastern situation becomes volatile again, and now it's extremely disastrous as the illegitimate state of Israel once again, first of all, they abandoned the ceasefire deal or the negotiations for peace, and at the same time Israel enforced total blockade of Gaza in sense of that they cut electricity, the food, medicine and the water supplies, and the residents of Gaza, they were in hunger. And this was all going on during the holy month of Ramadan, as Israel is actually using starvation as a weapon of war. Then Israeli regime resumed its genocidal intent, the genocidal war in Gaza. The ground assault along with heavy aerial bombardment once again started, the same which were happened in last 15 months after October 7, 2023. So far, over 590 innocent Palestinians killed at the hand of occupation forces, more than 1,000 are severely injured, and a cumulative death toll and injured is now crossed over 170,000. Now, in West Bank, the situation is not different than Gaza, because in West Bank, the settlers and the Israeli occupation forces violence is going on. There are dozens of deaths in last 1 week, and moreover, there is complete demolition plan going on in West Bank. 500 more settlements, illegal settlements ordered already. And the UN Human Rights Council and its chief, during what the report published just recently, they warned that Israel is planning to have complete annexation of West Bank. Tel Aviv also started bombing campaign in neighboring Lebanon and in Syria as well. On the other hand, United States attacking Yemen. Houthis fired at least 2 missiles at Tel Aviv. And US also threatened Iran that there would be dire consequences if Iran will not rein in Houthis. But the Houthis already announced not only attacking Israel but also in Red Sea, and Hamas welcomed those attacks. Now, what is actually happening in Middle East, particularly when we are talking about Gaza and West Bank? What about the Arab-Islamic reconstruction, the Gaza Reconstruction Plan, whether it's shelved or still alive? What about the future truce or ceasefire, whether the efforts are on or all efforts are now ended? What would be the ultimate future of the Palestinian statehood? And why the international powers, particularly United States, is aligned only with Israel and negating whole of the world's view about Palestine? What about the role of China and Russia? And why there is no stabilizing factor in Middle East right now? What about Israel and the US, particularly the Trump administration's Gaza Reverie Plan, whether it's intact or this all which is now happening is just for that realization of that plan? So there are lots of questions. We will get answers of these, and for that we have in our studios Dr. Mohammed Saeed. He is the assistant professor, head of department of the Department of International Relations at the National University of Modern Languages, Rawalpindi campus. Thank you very much, sir. So nice of you for your presence here.
Thank you so much.
And with him, Dr. Sajid Iqbal Khattak. He is the Middle Eastern Affairs expert. Thank you very much, Dr. Saab, for your presence here.
Thank you.
And online joining us, Mr. Faraz Naqvi. He is the head of Iran program at the Institute of Regional Studies, Islamabad. Thank you very much, Faraz, for your presence online. My first question to you, Sajid Iqbal Khattak, sir. Dr. Saab, in the holy month of Ramadan, illegitimate state of Israel first enforced the total aid blockade. We all know. Then ordered the displacement, the inhuman displacement. Uh, then of course the truce talks gone, and again imposed the genocidal war on Gaza people right now. There was a sigh of relief after 15 months. Hamas was ready to have the second round of the truce. But unfortunately, right from the first day, the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu was to sabotage the peace talks and the ceasefire. So now what's the future of the Arab-Islamic Gaza Reconstruction Plan? Whether it's shelved or it's alive? Or what about the Independent Palestinian State? Because now more than 150 countries, the members of the United Nations, they are stressing hard to have the Palestinian state intact. What do you think about it?
Thank you, Faisal, for having me on your show. I think it was very clear from the day one of the ceasefire or the truce between Israel and Hamas that this was not a just, you can say, agreement between the two sides. Because, you know, agreements are always justified when it is between two equal powers and it is between two equal parties. And one of the very clear strategic objectives of Israel from this truce was to release their captives from Hamas, because their only weakness with respect to this ongoing war was that Israeli captives were there with Hamas. So they have somehow, you know, managed to achieve this objective. Benjamin Netanyahu objectives were very clear. Even when it was Joe Biden's administration at the United States, at that time the whole world, you can say, was convincing Israel to have a ceasefire, to have you can say negotiations, to have a peaceful settlement of the situation. But it was very clearly stated, even at the United Nations, at the United States Congress, when Benjamin Netanyahu was addressing the US Congress, he was there very clear that we have to eliminate the threat, and for them eliminating the threat means a complete genocide, completely, you can say, killing the innocent civilians in Gaza, in West Bank and elsewhere in Palestine, wherever they are resisting. This is very clear. So somehow we can say that Hamas is now, you can say, will have to react, and because they have no other option. But the unfortunate part is that all the actors within Palestine and even within the region are very defensive. They are still, you can say, saving their own selves. What to talk of the Arab states? You know, groups within Palestine are not in line with the policy of Hamas, and they are defensive. So, you know, in the face of total offensive by Israel against the innocent civilians, I think there is a need of the time to react and to retaliate, because ultimately at the end of the day, Israel's plan is not just limited to Palestine. It wants a greater Israel, and that will also, you can say, engulf the other regional countries as well. And unfortunately, the regional countries are showing off very weak position with respect to, you can say, Israel's offensive. And it seems like, you can say, even some of the prominent Arab states like Saudi Arabia and others, they are even not, you can say, showing any teeth in the face of the Israeli atrocities.
That is very important. That is very important, really. Dr. Said, do you not think that despite of the United Nations, Arab states and the international community's widespread condemnation and rejection of the US-Israeli joint Reverie Plan, no doubt extremely devastating. But to now, it seems that it is again aligned, and this plan still exists, even not to expel the residents, but to kill them, to wipe them out. And unfortunately, the US and Israel had already, what they said, they have opened gates of hell in Gaza already and rejected the Arab world's Gaza Reconstruction Plan right from the first day. So, do you not think that this is going to be a very disastrous situation, and this is the time that the Arab League, the Muslim Ummah, OIC, Organization of Islamic Cooperation, and all other, even China, Russia and all others, they have to act now, because otherwise it would be too late for the Gazans and even for the Palestinians overall?
This is a very interesting question, and at the outset I need to mention that, you know, since October 7, more than 70,000 people have been killed, and 50% of that is comprised of women and children.
Yes.
And you know, the old age people, the innocent people, the victims, the innocent Palestinians, you know, they are living in devastation and destruction, and their life is miserable. The atrocities and brutalities which Israeli forces inflicted upon these innocent, Palestinians, I think these are required to be condemned by international community. In this backdrop, when the President Trump, he is passing statement that we want to make this a visiting place, I mean to say Gaza Strip, this is sheer embarrassment for humanity. This is brutal. It depicts the nasty nature of international politics. And what I think that in order to understand Trump's strategy, we need to look into it critically. I mean to say there are rules of games, and on the other hand, there are games within the rules. So why Trump passed that statement? It is two-pronged strategy. Number one, the world knew, and the United States of America, President Trump, he knew that once this conflict or this war is over, the world will be looking up to United States of America for reconstruction and rebuilding. So what he did, he passed this statement, and this statement acted as an impetus for the Gulf countries, for the Arab countries, you know, to collect the fund, to gather the fund in order
We have
reconstruction.
gone through the reaction of United States particularly. But we know that Israel would have the straight away no when it comes to the Gaza Reconstruction Plan. But unfortunate, it's very unfortunate that what kind of response and reaction coming from United States, no doubt about that. Your point well taken. For us, how do you rate the Israeli demand to negotiate the three-stage deal earlier agreed with the Egyptians, Qatari teams and the US mediators, or it was just a delaying tactic as the Israel intends to impose the new genocidal war on Gaza, never had any intention of moving to the second phase of the ceasefire. Hamas is just an excuse, has blind US support available, while Hamas, although stated that there must have to be talks and the ceasefire, but they are retaliating right now as well. But they are insisting again that there must have to be a peace process without any preconditions, but occupation forces must have to halt aggression and genocidal intent, withdraw its troops and begin the second phase. Do you think that there is any essence left to have some sort of ceasefire or the peace deal between Hamas and Israel?
Thank you so much, Faisal, for inviting me to your show. Well, from the very beginning, we were all aware that all the ceasefire process was basically a hawkish or sort of a delaying tactic by the Israeli forces and Israeli government, because it was not entirely a ceasefire deal. It was primarily the hostage deal, and that is why we saw that the second phase of the ceasefire was never negotiated. The preconditions were not set, so it already created a lot of doubts regarding the sustainability of this ceasefire. Regarding your question about will a new deal will be signed between the Hamas and Israel, I think it would be very, very difficult, because once the trust has been broken, it is very difficult for any party to come to the negotiation table again. And that is why precisely the Israeli government has again started the air strikes and bombardment of the Gazans to pressurize the Hamas and its external sponsor to come to the negotiation table and to agree on the terms of Israel and the US. We see that internally Israel is also facing quite a lot of turbulence regarding the social protest and the pro-government and anti-government clashes, and that is why we have seen that Israeli government has sacked the head of Shin Bet, the Israeli security agency. So it shows that how Netanyahu government is basically manipulating not within the not with the Gazans only, but also within its own country, to divide the public opinion and to divide the government apparatus and to somehow ensure the survivability of its own regime. And that is why we see that because of this hawkish stances and because of this ultra nationalist and Zionist ideology, it is very difficult that any sort of deal would be sustainable in a near future.
Talking about the hawkish behavior, why not that must have to be there when Israel has a very strong support of the United States? As in an interview, the White House press secretary Caroline Leavitt confirmed that the US had been consulted by Israel on the latest assault, adding that the President Trump had made it clear that Hamas and all those who seek to terrorize not just Israel but also United States of America will see price to pay. And pertaining to that, a previous threat issued by the Trump administration or Trump himself to Hamas, Leavitt warned that all hell will break loose. And now, do you not think that the hell has already broken loose in Gaza, and this situation which is now started is not going to end anytime soon?
Well, Faisal, during the previous administration of President Biden, it was a state-to-state affair. It was an international order. Whether it was right or wrong, that was another debate. But the US during the Biden administration was basically trying to build up the consensus in favor of Israel and to cultivate ties in terms of security apparatus with Israel from state perspective. That is, the US is supporting Israel in its war against Hamas. But now the circumstances is completely different, because it is not the state affair. It is the personal connection between the President Donald Trump and Netanyahu. And since we all know the personality of Donald Trump, he is basically of the illusion that he is somehow the person who can bring peace in the entire globe. And that is why we have seen his stances on the Ukraine war, that somehow to wind up the deal, wind up the conflict in favor of a deal that is that is favorable to the US. And that is why we have seen the replica of that process in the Middle East, and specifically in the Gaza conflict, that somehow is the US under Donald Trump is trying to wind up the whole irritant that is being present by the name Hamas. So President Donald Trump has signaled the green light to the Netanyahu and his government to continue their brutality in Israel, in Gaza, to pressurize the Hamas and Iran as well as Houthis to somehow backtrack, and so that his personal ambition of reconstruction of Gaza for the real estate benefit, for the economic perspective, for the perspective of the business of his son-in-law, I think that is what right now matters from the US perspective, specifically from the personality of President Donald Trump.
Your point well taken. Thank you, Faraz. Dr. Sajid, how do you see the US role regarding abandoning Palestinians and throwing them into the fire with the genocidal intent and supporting illegitimate state of Israel? The same attitude during the Trump administration as of the Biden era. Even it seems that the US retreating from its role of the global superpower by restricting itself to the role of Israeli ally. And that actually prompts to have the peace-loving states to come forward, particularly when we are talking about China's role in Middle East and the Russian role in stabilizing the West Asia or the Middle Eastern region. But there is also a silence. We have seen some sort of a condemnation, but when it comes to the policy of China and Russia regarding the Middle East, that is a bit shaky.
Exactly, and I will agree with Faraz that Donald Trump enjoys personal family relations with Benjamin Netanyahu as well, and that is in addition to the earlier US-Israel nexus in this war. And moreover, you know, Donald Trump foreign policy, or the overall his approach to international relations, is purely based on a business model. And we have seen that you can say Israel, United States bilateral trade, or the weapon that Israel buys from the United States is massive. For example, last year it was a $50 billion you can say bilateral trade between Israel and the United States of America. And as mentioned earlier by Faraz, that the United States of America is also looking for the real estate adventure in Gaza as well. So he is looking into this whole situation. Donald Trump is looking into this whole situation from a business point of view. But there is a hope as well, you know, in this whole scenario, because if he is looking into this from a business point of view, then we have already seen that in his last tenure, he had a $450 billion bilateral trade agreements with Saudi Arabia. And he is looking for $1 trillion bilateral agreements with Saudi Arabia. So this is where you can say we have this liberty of bargaining or negotiating the US role or the US support to Israel, because we can bring in some flexibility in Donald Trump policy towards Gaza. But that again would be possible if Saudi Arabia and all other Muslim states take ownership of the situation and they do not alienate Hamas.
So what about China and Russia?
China's foreign policy, you know, even now is not, you can say, is very defensive and is very, you can say, based on the soft power, you can say, influence. Although China has tried softly by inviting all the diverse groups in Palestine to China and to have, you can say, some consensus within the group, and that was something from China which could have had a meaningful impact on the conflict, but unfortunately those groups still are not on the same page. But Russia on the other hand is engaged in Ukraine, and Russia do have this history of geopolitical interventions in global affairs. But we have seen that Russia is now over-occupied in Ukraine, and it is not possible for Russia because, you know, this war in Ukraine has economic repercussions for Russia as well, and Russian economy is not that good shape. So,
definitely, your point well taken. Your point well taken, Dr. Saeed. With start of Israeli genocidal war, whether Egypt and Qatar's peace efforts completely ended or still have some sort of hope there, as the illegitimate state of Israel claimed that the Tel Aviv insisted for remaining captives return in exchange of the ceasefire extended after Eid, blamed Hamas for rejection of the proposal to secure a ceasefire extension, refused to release remaining captives, and threatened to stepping up military action, while Hamas is completely rejecting this notion. Whether Israel was using this excuse to continue its genocidal intent, what's the reality?
Okay, the world was long waiting for this ceasefire because since October 7 up till now, you see thousands of people have been killed. 2/3 of infrastructure in Gaza Strip, you know, it is converted into rubbles, and there are thousands of people under that rubble. So world was waiting for ceasefire, and that ceasefire of January, you know, it was long awaited and it was seen as a hope. It was observed as a hope. But what happened? Israel, you know, Israel did the same thing in the history. I mean to say, they back off from the peace plans. If you look into Oslo Accord 1, Oslo Accord 2, this is what Israel did. And you know, the lack of implementation of Oslo Accord 1 and Oslo Accord 2, that basically points to the two-state solution, which is the right of Palestinian people, you know, so that is in the line with self-determination that is provided by, you know, the United Nations Charter. So I think that Israel intentionally and, you know, based in its malign intentions to annex Gaza, it is perpetrating the same offensive. So I think that the international community is required to look into it, and particularly the Gulf countries. You know, we know that Israel has this technological advancement. They have edge of technological advancement. We know that they have economic capabilities. We know that they are integrated in the Western world, particularly under the umbrella of United States of America. But you know, the national interest of Gulf Cooperation Councils like UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, and you know that are aligned to Saudi Arabia, they should not devise their strategy at the cost of innocent Palestinians. I mean to say, initially they had focused on geopolitics, but now they are focusing on geoeconomics. So this geoeconomic strategy for maximizing the economic gratification that is at the cost of
that's why this Gazans and even the whole of the Palestinian right now, they are suffering because of this whole, no doubt about that. Faraz, a different report suggests that the Israeli occupation forces started its targeted ground operation in the central and southern Gaza Strip to expand the security parameters. Israel extended its control over Netzarim corridor, widening it from 500 meter to 8 kilometers now. This is going to be huge. Dividing north from south Gaza Strip to create a partial buffer zone between north and south, and the Israeli occupation forces also confirmed this operation. And secondly, the illegitimate state of Israel's defense minister, Kaz, given last warning to the Gaza residents, demanded return remaining hostages and removal of Hamas from power. What do you think? This is not, they are kidding right now that is it possible that for a common Gaza resident to challenge Hamas or to just throw them away from power? So is it practically viable?
Well, Faisal, from the Israeli perspective, there could be two silver lining in that. The first one is that by extending this corridor, Israel wants to further divide the Palestinian into two separate Gaza territory, the northern one and the southern one, where the most of the civilians would be the residents of the southern one, while the northern Gaza could be assimilated into the Israeli mainland territory over the period of time. That could be the first possibility. The other possibility is that to completely wipe out the Palestinian citizens from northern Gaza and to resettle them in the South Gaza, so as to create the whole of North Gaza as a buffer zone, because we all know that the October 7 attacks were conducted from the northern side of Gaza. So that could be the second possibility. Regarding the statement of Israeli Defense Minister, I think that it is just another arena where we might say that it is just another excuse of sabotaging the ceasefire by making an excuse that Hamas did not cede to their demands. But I think it was not the initial memento that was agreed between the two parties, because most of the Palestinian prisoners are still there in the Israeli camps or in the Israeli jails. So it has to be vice versa, because if Hamas is to release some of the Israeli soldiers, that it could be compensated, or it should be compensated rather, that the same amount of the Palestinian prisoners should be freed. But I think this is not the real motive of Netanyahu cabinet, because Netanyahu is basically eyeing to sabotage the ceasefire deal and to increase the militarization operations so as to expand the territory of Israel. We must not forget that the greater Israel agenda of Israel is still on cards, it is still on table, and we have seen the practical implementation of this in the case of Syria, where Israel has basically expanded its influence and settlements beyond the Golan Heights, and it could also replicate the same in the case of North Gaza or probably the entirety of Gaza. And we have also seen that Israel has increased its attack not only on Gaza but also in the West Bank. So there is no Hamas in the West Bank. There are no hostages, Israeli hostages.
Definitely, because Israel has the larger occupation agenda, no doubt about that. Your point well taken, Faraz. Dr. Saeed, some reports telling us that domestic political factors are actually driving the de facto Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel. Decision to revive Gaza genocidal war particularly, as he needs support from the right-wing allies, especially of the ex-hardline National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir, as he, along with the other minister, left cabinet on the ceasefire agreement particularly. They want to continue the genocidal war. It's because the Netanyahu intends to win some crucial votes in Israeli parliament in coming days and weeks, and to maintain particularly his grip on power, because he is losing a bit in Israel. So how do you see this aspect of the domestic politics is now more aligned when it comes to the Gaza genocidal war?
Okay, Faisal, this, whatever is happening at the domestic level or at international level, this is incompatibility with the interest of Israeli state apparatus. I mean to say, if you look into the systemic forces, this is ideal for Israel, keeping in view, Russia-Ukraine war, and as you mentioned, as Dr. Sajid mentioned, that China is defensive and focusing on soft power. So keeping in view the Chinese strategy, Russia's engagement in Ukraine, and US,
leverage.
President Trump is there in Washington and managing the affairs of US administration. So what exactly is happening? This is making an ideal environment for Israel to do whatever it can to achieve its political objectives. So on one hand, systemic forces are supporting the Israeli atrocities and brutalities. On the other hand, if you look into domestic factors, see the far right politics, the hardliners, they are pushing the Israeli state, which is already brutal and fascist. I mean to say, they are pursuing policies of apartheid. See, the innocent civilians, they are making innocent Palestinians the victim of brutal use of force. They are using AI based technologies, and those AI based technologies are being used as an experiment. If you allow me to express, unfortunately, these are experiments, and what Israeli forces are doing, they are collecting the data based on those AI technologies, and there are errors and omissions in that. I mean to say, if you look into the atrocities which I mentioned earlier, more than 70,000 people have been killed. So the majority is comprised of women and children.
Unfortunately, they are making drama. They are just playing with the humanity right now. Unfortunately, Dr. Sajid, there are lots of widespread protests there in the illegitimate state of Israel. We have seen, and those were against the de facto Prime Minister Netanyahu and his cabinet members, particularly when this genocidal war resumed, and the intent is very clear. Whether it's just for the 59 or 60 captives who are left in Gaza right now, or it is some kind of humanitarian thinking is there in the minds of Israelis who are right now at an occupied land.
There is no doubt that some human rights groups and activists and even writers, Israeli writers, are writing against the Benjamin Netanyahu's policies and atrocities in Gaza. But overall, I believe that because yesterday I was watching Benjamin Netanyahu's video message after he started attacks, and I was reading comments. So roughly 80% of the comments were acknowledging and were supporting Benjamin Netanyahu's renewed attacks in Gaza. So this shows the overall mentality of the people in Israel, who are basically anti-Muslims, anti-Palestinians, and there are presently 3 criminal charges and criminal cases going against Benjamin Netanyahu in Israel, and all the 3 charges are in corruption cases.
We are coming to that one as well. That is very important aspect. I'll discuss it with you on that as well. For us, when we are talking about particularly, you were mentioning about the Yemeni Houthis and their attack on Israel, and the role of Iran, how they see the renewed conflict. So there is a threat from the United States. Already they have a strike in Yemen in which a number of people died, and US President Trump actually threatened Iran to have dire consequences if Iran does not rein in Houthis to stop their attacks on Israel. But Yemeni group appears to have ignored all those threats, and they have not only attacked Israel, but also they have announced to have attacks in Red Sea as they were doing earlier. So for the first time ever, US-Israel Strategic Consultative Group is also going to meet in Washington next week on Iran's nuclear program. There was a letter also which were written by the President Donald Trump to Iranian leadership, and today Iranian Foreign Minister termed it that it's more a threat than the urgency for talks. So how do you see overall scenario when it comes to Yemen, Houthis and Iran?
Well, Faisal, before answering that, let me elaborate what my previous colleague was saying. There is resistance within Israel against the Netanyahu decision of renewed attacks on Palestine and Gaza, and this resistance is not out of love for the Palestinian or out of concerns for the Palestinian. I agree that, but it is because they think that prolonging the war would create backlash for the civilians in Israel because of the renewed threats on Israel by Houthis or by the Hamas, and so many of the young people would die in the war, and the families of those citizens would definitely be against this prolonging of this conflict. So I think there is resistance is still present inside Israel. Regarding your primary question, I think that this whole renewation of conflict in Yemen, in Gaza, and the diplomatic push of US towards Iran, it is all because of just one thing, and that is the concern of Iran's nuclear program that could be going to be nuclearized or militarized, because there are statements from the Iranian leadership that Iran might transform its nuclear strategy. So far, Iran has been insistent upon running its nuclear program for the civilian purpose. But the recent statements by the Iranian leadership, starting all the way from the top, that is the advisor of Supreme Leader Javed Larijani, he has mentioned that there is a possibility that Iran's nuclear posture might be transformed and it could go towards militarization. And this is why, and we should also not forget that this year would be the last year of JCPOA, because JCPOA was agreed for the tenure of 10 years, and in 2025 in September or October that deadline would expire as well. So the urgency from the US part is there, because if this JCPOA deal is not renewed, the chances of striking a new deal would be very, very difficult for the US. And if the US would be unable to strike a deal with Iran, not only it would be backlashing for the US in the domestic affairs, but also it could cause instability in the entire Middle East, because if Iran could get nuclearized, it would create a source of fear and threat for Israel as well.
Obviously,
So
your point well taken. Your point well taken for us, Dr. Sajid. What about Israeli de facto Prime Minister Netanyahu's domestic front? As you were rightly pointing out, lots of cases intends to save actually his own skin. One of which is to dismiss the Israel's Chief of Internal Security Service, Shin Bet, override the checks to avoid at least two investigations Shin Bet is actually going through, and also he is facing, as you were mentioning, about 3 corruption cases. If found guilty, could face prison, and due to the renewal of war, he is actually allowed with his plea not to appear before the court during the hearing. So this is again is going to be some kind of a political gain which he is getting and prolonging his right now prolonging his government.
This argument is quite valid that he is trying to to save himself, but I was interpreting it differently. I was saying that there are 3 corruption charges against Benjamin Netanyahu, but unfortunately no case is filed against him during these past 1.5 years against him, which is related to war crimes or which is related to the human rights violations within Israel. Although there was a case in the International Criminal Court which was decided against him, and his arrest warrants were issued, but there was no case by the opposition groups or even from his own, you can say, Israelis is registered against him. This shows that people overall are in synchronization with his policy of, you can say, atrocities against the Gazans. This is what I am trying to say. But yes, on the other hand, we can say that, if this war ends at this point, if this truce continues or this reconstruction plan of Egypt continues, which is in 3 phases, there is no takeaway for Benjamin Netanyahu, and his future politics is dead, because what he is going to say that what he has achieved, if this whole Gaza region is reconstructed and the Palestinians are then resettled, what he has achieved.
Obviously, your point well taken. Actually, we have run short of time, so I don't say the very brief. What about the fears that the illegitimate state of Israel might ramp up for complete annexation of the West Bank, as the UN Human Rights Chief already warned, and a report that the significant expansion of the illegitimate state of Israel forced settlements and consolidation in the occupied West Bank, including East Jerusalem. Volker Turk urged that the Israel must evacuate all settlers from the West Bank, make reparation for decades of the illegal settlements over there, and termed the Israeli act as a war crime because Israel has an intention and a planning to completely annex West Bank. How do you respond?
Faisal, these all settlements are illegal. And if you look into the verdict of International Court of Justice in 2024, they have reaffirmed this. And they said that they passed the statement that this is against the Article 49 of the 4th Geneva Convention. And if I briefly mention few facts about history, if you look into 1948, the end of British Mandate, so the territory was, 45%, 50 and 5. But the Arab and Israel, they fought major wars, 48, 67 and 73. In 1967 war, the configuration of the territory became 78% to Israel and 22 to this Palestine. And now if we look into the contemporary statistics, I think that as Dr. Sajid mentioned, the political objective of Israel is to make a state that is greater Israel. Here I want to mention one very important point. Holocaust. Yeah, the world acknowledged Holocaust. Yeah, millions of Jews were killed during the World War II. What you are doing right now, you are killing innocent Palestinians. And this is genocide. This is ethnic cleansing. And I would urge to international community.
And unfortunately, very few are condemning this
yes,
one. And
one very important point. The world has this remembrance day of this Holocaust on 27th.
We have run short of time.
We should have genocide of Palestinian. It should be recognized by international community, and we should have that international
Definitely,
day.
you are absolutely right. For us, very brief, because we have no time left now. What about Syria and Lebanon? Because illegitimate state of Israel stepped up its attacks in Syria and on Lebanon as well.
Well, for Lebanon, it is because to dismantle and pressurize Hezbollah to counter-check Iranian aspiration in Lebanon, while for the case of Syria, it is just to expand its influence in the Syrian territory so that the Islamist rebels that are in power in Syria would not threaten the security of Israel. That is my brief analysis in this situation.
Thank you very much, Faraz, for joining us online and very candid and elaborated views. Thank you very much, Dr. Saeed, for your presence here. Thank you very much, Dr. Sajid, for your presence in the studios. Viewers, as you have just listened to our panelists, it is unfortunately the situation is completely devastating right now as the illegitimate state of Israel's genocidal war is continued right now in Gaza and even in West Bank. Unfortunately, Israel has the intention to not only annex West Bank but also wipe out the residents over there and overall capture Gaza. It is not the case of any sort of a buffer zone only, or might be some sort of a net zero corridor or anything else right now. When we are talking about the ceasefire or the truce talks, unfortunately, these are still stalled, but Qatar and Egypt, they are trying hard to revive that, and their efforts are genuine right now. When we are talking about the role of Muslim Ummah and particularly the Arab states, it is important that the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Qatar and all other countries, they have to step up now. We are too much defensive when it comes to the OIC and Arab League. So this is going to be disastrous because the greater Israeli plan still exists when it comes to Israel. So if that plan is going to be moved forward, it is going to be a real danger, not only for the neighboring countries of the Palestine, but also for rest of the Muslim Ummah as well. So Iran's question is very important. Its nuclear program, because America, United States of America and Israel are after that. And the consultative group meeting, which is going to be held soon, is going to discuss this one. And this is going to be a movement. Might be Iran is going to be militarized when it comes to its nuclear program, and that is going to be a threat for the Middle East as well. And on that note, Israel and the United States will try hard to have that, but the negotiation is the key. And in whole of the scenario, whether it's Lebanon, whether it's Syria, whether it's West Bank or Gaza or overall Palestine, it's important that China and Russia must play their role because they are the one who can create some sort of a different and change and to have realization of the Palestinian statehood in future. This is all from today's Foresight. It's time to sign off. Allah Hafiz.